Hello there, everybody. Welcome back. I am doing a concert review today. I've done a few of these concert reviews on my channel. Y'all seem to really enjoy them. I've gotten a lot of nice compliments from you people that are watching, so thank you so much. Um, Last night, I had the great privilege on November 27th to see my idol, my musical hero, the greatest songwriter ever, Mr. Robert Zimmerman, Bob Dylan. You can see him here in a lot of my videos. He's the man. I love him. There's something on every Bob Dylan album that I like, and that includes Knocked Out Loaded, Tommy Burton. But anyway, with that said, I've seen Dylan 4 times up to this point. This was time number 5. Second time at this venue at the Altria Theater in Richmond, Virginia. For those of you that know Richmond history, you'll know that this was formerly called the Mosque Theater. And for those of you that are Elvis fanatics, you might be interested to know some Elvis trivia at this venue. Elvis played there, and a photographer took a very famous picture of Elvis kissing a young fan at backstage. It was like there's a story that just came out a couple of years ago, but it's a very famous picture of Elvis kissing this woman, and it ended up on an Elvis compilation called "Elvis Loves You" or something like that. So just look up Elvis in Richmond, and you'll see the picture I'm talking about. But this was a very special show for me. Mostly, I mean, it's always a special show when I see Bob, but this was the second time that I've seen Bob Dylan on his current Rough and Rowdy Ways tour. He's currently promoting this album, which now has 3 years on it. So he's due for another album. Come on, Bob. I know he just put out the Shadow Kingdom album, the soundtrack, earlier this year, but we need another album of originals or covers soon. I would love it. But again, second time I've seen him on this tour, but what was cool about this was this venue is the venue where I first saw Bob Dylan. I think back in 2015 when I was a junior in high school, when he was promoting. He had put out the Tempest album, and he had just done Shadows in the Night, the first of his 3 crooner albums. So this was a treat to be back in that venue to see Bob again. I had much better seats this time. The first time I went with my dad. We sat in the balcony, and this time I was in the second orchestra section on the floor. So much better, very, very cool front-on shot of Bob. Bob looks different than he did in 2015. Again, I just saw Bob in April, so I know what he looks like. But he's aged. He's 82, but vocally, his vocals were much better than that show than 2015. And this show, this might have been, I mean, other than the first Dylan show, which was, it'll probably always be my favorite just because that's when I first saw him. This is probably my second favorite Dylan show in terms of quality, out of the 5 that I've seen. And he sounded fantastic. His snarl was there. If you're just thinking, like Bob's voice from like Tempest or Christmas from the Heart, he's really worked on his voice. He's still got, I mean, it's a rough voice, as we all know, but it has a lot of that 80s snarl that he had, like with the Wilburys. Like that's come back. I don't know if he's quit smoking, what the deal is, but his voice sounds strong. It was great. His piano playing was fantastic. He sat at his grand piano the whole night, and it was an interesting start to the performance. So the stage had the curtain down, and then they had like this big pre-recorded, like, fanfare music, and then the curtain rose, and there's Bob with his 5-piece band, already positioned to play. And again, those of you that know modern Dylan shows, it's kind of a dark stage with little lamps all around it, lights. And Dylan was looking cool. He had on this black jacket, and he would turn around every now and then, and he had like almost like 2 like lightning bolts on either side. Had sequins on it, and he was wearing a white fedora, kind of like the fedora, like kind of like the hat that he wore during the Wilburys era, because there was a time where he wore like that big white brim hat. This was like a fedora, And I was front center. Bob was in the center of the stage on the piano versus on the sides. And I think that's because Bob does not stand hardly at all during the show. And so I think he wanted people to see him front and center so that he wasn't off to the side, because a couple times that I've seen Bob, he would do the piano, then he'd walk to the mic, do a couple songs, and then go back. Um, he stood up after every song just about at the piano and kind of, acknowledged the band to stop the song. And at the very end of the show, he walked to a mic and stood there so that when we all applauded for him, which he did not do the stand up at the piano when I saw him in Greensboro last year. I think he was fighting a cold that night. I noticed he had tissues and he drank water after every song. I don't think he ever took a sip of water the other night or last night, but musically it was fantastic. I think for the times that I've seen Bob, this was his hardest rocking band. I wish I remembered all the guys' names. He still has Tony Garnier on bass, who's been with him since the 80s. And Tony's played with a ton of people, including Tom Waits. He also had Donnie Herron on pedal steel and fiddle and mandolin. He's been with him for a long time. The rhythm player and the lead guitarist, I don't remember their names, I apologize. But the drummer was a fellow named Jerry Pentecost, who played about 3 years with Old Crow Medicine Show. And he played on their last 2 records. And then he departed the band. And all Old Crow said when he left, it was amicable, but they said that he had another opportunity that he couldn't pass up. And this was the opportunity. He got to play drums for Bob Dylan. So that's very cool. Jerry Pentecost is a really cool dude. He's got a great singing voice of his own, very charismatic. He was drumming and kind of even flipping some sticks a few times. Just a really, really cool guy. Check out Jerry Pentecost. And again, the set list is pretty much the same as I saw it last year. He hasn't really verged much from the set list. He does 9 out of the 10 songs on this record, except for disc 2, which is the song Murder Most Foul, about JFK. That's the only song he hasn't done live from this album. But the first song of the night from the album, so he opens with Watching the River Flow, which was a cut that ended up on Greatest Hits 2, I believe. And then he did most likely You'll Go Your Way and I'll Go Mine, which is really interesting how he was doing the vocals on that, because he would be singing, he'd be like, when you go your way, and then the band would keep playing, and he would just kind of throw in, and I'll go mine. It was just like a little, like an afterthought almost. And of course, Bob's changed up the arrangement so much that actually I had an older gentleman next to me. The third song played, which was the song I Contain Multitudes from this album. And he asked me what song that was. He said, is that from the new album? No, sorry, it was the fourth song. The fourth song he did was False Prophet from this album, which is a really rocking song. But he's even he's changing the arrangements now on these songs, his newest songs. If you listen to I Contain Multitudes, it's very, very sparse on here. Just a little bit of bass and a little bit of guitar. There's no percussion. And he essentially took I Contain Multitudes and almost made it like a fiddle tune. So it was a little bit more upbeat. Really, really cool sound. Goodbye Jimmy Reed was a rocker from this album. Mother of Muses was beautiful. My favorite song on this album is called I've Made Up My Mind to Give Myself to You. It's a beautiful love song. But it was funny again because with the phrasing, he would change it and he would say, I've made up my mind to give myself to, he was just playing with it. Every single time it was a little bit different. Every time the chorus came around, was really, really cool. He also did songs, again, same songs from Greensboro. I'll Be Your Baby Tonight, he did. Again, I said When You Go Your Way and I'll Go Mine, Watching the River Flow. He did That Old Black Magic, which ended up on the Fallen Angels album, I believe. Let me double check that. But yeah, so from the Fallen Angels, he did That Old Black Magic, which was really, really cool just to hear that thrown in the mix. He didn't do that in Greensboro, I don't believe, but I've heard him do it before. And then he also did a really rocking version of Well, he also did When I Paint My Masterpiece, the old Basement Tapes tune, and he's always changing the lyrics to that, so that was cool to hear. Um, they did kind of like a slow intro on that, and then they kind of broke into it. It was cool, but he also did "Gotta Serve Somebody," which, just like the Greensboro show, was the rockinest tune of the night from the Slow Train Comin' album. The guitar player was really ripping it on electric guitar on that song. It was fantastic. Um, you know, he's like, it may be the devil, it may be the Lord. Like the way that he was like singing that line was just so cool. And then like he was just shredding on the guitar. Bob was doing these great piano licks. That was fantastic. Um, then I mean he did some band introductions, which it's always funny how he does band introductions because it's hard for him to it's hard to hear what he's saying when he's talking. Um, but one thing I should say on Goodbye Jimmy Reed, he talks about going back to Virginia. There's one of the lines in that, and then he kind of said that a little bit hard, and the whole end of the audience cheered for that. Um, but then the moment in the show at the very end that put me over the edge in the best way was, and I know my friend Glenn Kellaway talked about this, um, was when he did Every Grain of Sand, which he did it in Greensboro, but he did it a lot better last night. And that's the only time he ever pulled out harmonica. Um, and he did that solo at the end, and I was just leaning forward, just listening to it, and I could my eyes got like misty. They were a little wet. That's my favorite Bob Dylan song. And again, every time I see Bob, I try not to take for granted that this might be the last time. Fortunately for me, if all goes right with Bob, I will be seeing him again, possibly later this week. Stay tuned. Um, but Every Grain of Sand is beautiful. That's when he finally came out from the piano at the end. They did the whole band stood up, and he doesn't do an encore, so like they left the lights off for a little bit, and then the lights came on, and everybody left. But again, for those of you that know, Bob does not allow cell phones at his show. It was very strict. So like even if you had the ticket on your phone, you could scan it in, and then they gave you these little green phone cases essentially that you put your phone into, and it locked, and you held it with you all night. It was like a padded little, like almost like a wallet for your phone with a lock on it. And then at the end of the show, you came out and they scanned the bags and they opened them back up, and you took your phone on your way. So it was, if people can film, if people get recording from that show, I don't know how they do it, but smartwatches weren't allowed. Tablets, phones, all that stuff wasn't allowed. So if you go to see Bob, keep that in mind. You're not getting out of there. This is the first time I've been to a show where they've used the pouches. It's usually just been if they see you with the phone, you're gone. Like they kick you. But it was a very respectful crowd. Very cool to go to a show with not a single cell phone. I think it makes the crowd a lot more respectful of the artist. There weren't a lot of like shouts or any kind of like crazy people jumping up and down. And very respectful show. Good mix of people. There were kids younger than me there. Obviously, you had your baby boomers and folks in their 80s that were also there that were the same age as Bob. But see him if you can. They're saying this might be the last tour because he does have an end date on it as 2024. So I'm sure he'll be announcing new dates, kind of going into the spring next year. But if you can grab one of these last few shows for this year, check it out. Again, I might be doing another Bob Dylan review very soon. So get this record as well, Rough and Rowdy Ways. Check out Bob, and let me know what you think. Let me know if you've seen him on this tour. All right, y'all. Subscribe. Thank you. All that good stuff. Be good. Take care, and we'll talk to you in the next one.